A very long time ago in southern Nigeria, there lived a woman named Ekaette. Ekaette was a very beautiful woman who was admired by the men in her village, but her major flaw was her attitude. She was very rude and spoke badly to people. Almost everyone in the village now knew her to be the woman with a bad character. Nobody there came close to her because she could switch up and turn against the person. Ekaette, despite having a terrible character, had a friend named Inie. Inie was also a beautiful woman and the only friend Ekaette had, and people always wondered how Inie was able to cope with Ekaette. But they had been friends from childhood, and it was only Inie's advice that Ekaette listened to. Inie, on the other hand, was the opposite of Ekaette. She possessed a very good character and was loved by all. Inie acted as a mother figure in Ekaette's life and always tried her best to put her on the right path. The two young women were both poor, but they did their best to survive. Because of this, Ekaette loved her friend so much. Inie, being beautiful and also having a wonderful character, attracted so many suitors. She eventually got married to the wealthiest trader in the village, and her life turned around for good. She was no longer that poor woman who lived in the slum. She now lived in luxury, and her husband provided everything for her. She had two beautiful children, a boy and a girl, and this made so many of the villagers envy her because she went from grass to grace. Inie never abandoned her friend despite her new lifestyle. She always still went back to visit Ekaette, and everything was like old times. They would joke, laugh, and discuss like old times. Inie, as always, still advised Ekaette to drop her bad attitude because it chased away her suitors and she was not getting any younger. Ekaette never paid attention to her because she knew that she was very beautiful and believed that her suitors would always come around. But as the years went by, Ekaette realized that most of her suitors departed from her and got married to the younger maidens in the village. She began to feel lonely and realized that things cannot always be the same as they used to, so she decided to start taking the few suitors she had left serious. Inie was so happy on hearing that Ekaette was not interested in getting married, so she advised and encouraged her. Ekaette finally decided to get married to one of her suitors, Edet, the village shoemaker. Edet was a hard-working shoemaker who lived a decent life. He was from a wonderful and supportive family, but his family, on hearing that he was interested in getting married to Ekaette, turned their backs on him. They were all against the marriage, but he adamantly went ahead with it, despite his family's disapproval. He didn't have much to his name, but he loved his wife Ekaette so much and did his best to provide for her. Inie and Ekaette became even closer now that Ekaette was married, and they always spent so much time together discussing their marital lives, among other things. Whenever Ekaette went to Inie's house, she saw how much her husband provided for her, and she always felt a certain way and wished that she was in Inie's shoes. She went to the market one day and she overheard people gossiping about her, saying that she's married to a poor man after bragging so many years back, while her friend Inie is living a lavish life. She became so frustrated because they were always managing the little they had in her home. She began taking out her frustration on her husband. She would always compare him to other well-to-do men in the village, especially Inie's husband. This made Edet work harder than ever. He also tried venturing into other businesses to see if he could make ends meet and to give his wife a better life. Ekaette was always idle, and her idleness made her to start harboring evil in her heart. Whenever Inie came visiting, She would always act cold towards her and her kids. Inie would wonder if she ever did anything wrong to Ekaette, but she couldn't think of anything wrong she did. She asked Ekaette what the problem was, but Ekaette would say there was no problem. Inie became so troubled and would speak to her husband about it, and her husband would advise that she avoids Ekaette, since she always gave her cold shoulders. Inie, having a kind heart, ignored her husband's advice and still kept trying to bring Ekaette out of her mood, but all efforts proved abortive. A few months later, Ekaette unexpectedly paid a visit to her friend Inie. Inie was so shocked to see Ekaette at her house. She happily hugged her and invited her in. Ekaette was surprisingly in a good mood, and Inie had missed her friend so much. They chatted and laughed, and it was getting late, so Inie decided to go to the kitchen to prepare her husband's dinner. The two women went in and cooked together, and in no time, Inie's husband came in. They both welcomed him, and Inie served his food. Ekaette took her leave as it was already late, and by the time Inie's husband had settled down, he ate and enjoyed the food. A few minutes later, he started complaining of severe stomach pain. The pain became so intense that Inie rushed out to call for help, and by the time she came in with help, he had passed out and was lying on the floor. She cried out of fear, and he was quickly rushed to the nearby native doctor. On getting there, he was still unconscious, so the native doctor said some incantations and poured a liquid in his mouth, and he regained consciousness. Inie took a deep sigh of relief on seeing that her husband was now awake. She asked the native doctor what was wrong with him, and he told her that he had been poisoned. And they were very lucky to have gotten to him early enough, else the poison would have taken his life. She was startled to hear that her husband was poisoned. "Who must have done it?" she said in deep shock. Her husband was a very good man in the village, so she wondered who would want to repay such a good man with evil. Then it came to her suddenly. She remembered that Ekaette, who had been avoiding her for months, came visiting and even volunteered to assist her in cooking in the kitchen. Ekaette was one who always avoided house chores, so it was weird that she wanted to assist all of a sudden. She cried and narrated the story to her husband and the native doctor. She would never have believed it if someone told her that Ekaette could do such a thing. She was in total confusion. She wondered where she must have gone wrong in their friendship. The native doctor advised that her husband had enough rest, and in a matter of days he would get better. They got home, and without wasting any time, she went to Ekaette's house to confront her. Ekaette, without any remorse, admitted to poisoning Inie's husband, and her reason for doing such was that Inie felt on top of the world because her husband was the richest trader in the village. So she had to poison him to teach Inie a lesson. Ekaette also mentioned that her only regret was that Inie's husband was still alive. She wished he had died from the poisoning. Inie couldn't believe her ears. She never thought that a day like this would come. She detested herself for always trying to bring Ekaette close to her, even after being warned of the kind of person she was dealing with. With so much sorrow and pain in her heart, Inie cursed Ekaette to never have her own children, and that happiness and peace would be lacking in her home. Ekaette laughed and said Inie was too late, as she was already 1 month pregnant with her child. Inie went back home in despair, and ever since that day, things began going south for Ekaette. The news of the incident between the two friends spread across the village like wildfire. Ekaette was always getting into one trouble or the other. Her once loving husband began to withdraw himself from her and act cold towards her. She wondered if it was the cause from Inie that was working or if it was just a coincidence. But she would always console herself with the fact that her baby was growing and healthy. There were no complaints, according to the doctor. Her life was in turmoil for months, and so on the 9th month of her pregnancy, she couldn't wait to put to bed. At least that was her only source of happiness and hope. She was due to put to bed, but she had no contractions. Weeks passed, yet nothing. At this point, she had tried everything possible and sought help, but no one had a solution to her problem, as this had never been heard of in the village. Her husband, who barely paid attention to her, advised her to go and beg her friend Inie for forgiveness, but she refused. It was no longer news in the village that Ekaette was cursed, never to give birth to her child. She carried her shame all around the village, as it was now more than a year that she was pregnant. Edet didn't want to be associated with a cursed and wicked woman, so he sent her packing from his house, since her pride didn't let her apologize to her friend. She went to stay in an abandoned house, and the entire village gossiped about her. She suffered so much because she had no one providing for her, and she realized that that was the condition she was going to put Inie through if her husband had died. She felt so sorry and regretted her actions. At this point, it was more than 2 years that she had been carrying the pregnancy, and the entire village used it to mock her. She also realized that if she didn't go to beg for forgiveness, she would be pregnant her whole life. So she one day summoned the courage to go pay Inie a visit. When Inie saw her, she was about throwing her out of her house, but Ekaette started crying and pleading for forgiveness. She cried so much and felt deeply sorry for her actions. This melted Inie's heart, and Inie could not bear seeing Ekaette suffer because she saw her like her younger sister. She immediately forgave Ekaette and took back all the curses. Ekaette repented from her evil ways. Her husband took her back in, and soon after she gave birth to a bouncing baby boy. What we can learn from this story is that comparing ourselves to other people, as Ekaette did, will only create friction among us. And being envious of others can come back to bite us in the back. So it is best to treat everyone with love and be patient till we get what we desire. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and turn on your post notification to get notified when next I post a new video. Bye!